I saw this viral tweet yesterday that said, watching CNN cut from the Charlie Kirk assassination to another school shooting across the country is a uniquely American experience. Now, just yesterday, conservative commentator Charlie Kirk was shot and killed at an event that he was debating at. At the very same time, in Colorado, 3 people were injured and a gunman killed himself at a separate school. These are completely separate instances, but it's a pattern that is all too common in America. Now, the response from many responsible leaders, like people in Congress, many commentators on the left, were very, very responsible. Of course, you want to tone down the rhetoric. But right-wing commentators had a very, very different reaction. Libs of TikTok said immediately, "This is war." It got 2.8 million views. I checked again this morning. It had hundreds of thousands of likes. Joey Manarino says, "The Democrat Party must be classified as a domestic terror organization, and their members, leaders, treated accordingly. Enough is enough." Now, these continue. I want to point out, we don't even know who the shooter is. It is not only irresponsible, but it is inflammatory, and it's pure incitement to try to pin this on one side when we don't know who the shooter is. It's very comparable to the Reichstag fire, and I'm not just making that up. Matt Forney said, this is a conservative commentator, he said, quote, "Charlie Kirk being assassinated is the American Reichstag fire. It is time for a complete crackdown on the left. Every Democratic politician must be arrested and the party banned under RICO. Every libtard commentator must be shut down. Stochastic terrorism, they caused this." Now, the Reichstag fire happened in Nazi Germany. Historians dispute whether the Nazis caused it and faked it or whether somebody set it off. Either way, it doesn't matter. The Nazis used it as propaganda and used it as an opportunity, a catalyst to consolidate power and target political enemies. Matt Forney says, this should be our Reichstag fire. And someone responds, "So you are the Nazis in this metaphor? I don't think this is a productive reaction." And Matt says, "It's not 2005 anymore. Nobody cares about being called a Nazi when you use that term to demonize everyone." They said, "But in this analogy, you were literally the National Socialist German Workers' Party in 1933. You made the analogy, brother." Sorry, it's not funny, but this person doesn't even know what they're talking about here. Because for a few reasons. They don't know what the Reichstag fire is, but we don't know who committed the shooting. This brings me to something that I want to talk about for a second. Kash Patel is our current FBI director. A year ago, he was a podcast bro. Our deputy FBI director is another podcast bro named Dan Bongino. The investigation into Charlie Kirk's assassination has been uniquely inefficient, and we need answers for Charlie Kirk's sake, for his family's sake, and for the country's sake. I think Charlie Kirk's family deserves answers. Tim Miller says, "These are very tense and serious times. We shouldn't have a shitposter with no experience live tweeting assassination investigations from atop the FBI." He says this because FBI Director Kash Patel got fact-checked, community noted. He said, "The subject for the horrific shooting today that took the life of Charlie Kirk is now in custody. Thank you to local and state authorities." Now, this was the second person they took into custody. The first guy, there were videos all across the internet, male in his older 60s. It wasn't him. He was released. So then Kash Patel makes this statement. It gets a few 100,000 likes, 34 million views. It blows up. Then he has to retract it. He says, "The subject in custody has been released after an interrogation by law enforcement." This tweet is going viral because it says, these are the guys in charge of catching the shooter, by the way. They're never finding that MF. Now, I don't know if they're going to find him or not. There's a chance that they do. Probably a decent chance in today's modern surveillance era. But look at, this is the 22-year-old counter-terrorist director, whatever his position is. He's 22 years old, and he's overseeing some committee on terrorism. And, of course, you have Kash Patel. Now, this actually brings me back around to this large infograph that was put together by MeidasTouch of a bunch of conservative reactions. I want to read through some more, then I want to flesh out my thoughts on this situation a bit more. Brian Eastwood says on X, quote, "Charlie Kirk getting shot is the shot heard around the country. I'm ready for civil war. You want to fight, and you're going to get it." Who is he posturing to? Nobody is asking for a cyclically violent fight against the other side. When I say that we should, put up a fight, I'm talking about organizing, canvassing, and showing up in the midterms, the 2020 election, and beyond. Never mistake that. When I say that we're about to go harder than we have before, I'm saying that we're going to organize like democratic mechanisms allow us to. Oilfield says, I don't want the National Guard sent to Democratic cities anymore. I want the Air Force sent. Sean Davis says, when Democrats lose elections they couldn't steal, they murder the people they were unable to defeat. All right, the gaslighting on this is absurd. There is zero Democratic politician that needs to apologize for anything. The view on this is quite simple to take. Nobody is saying you have to agree with Charlie Kirk. Many people who disagree with Charlie Kirk entirely still understand the gravity of this. You can even point out that Charlie Kirk is a hypocrite. The beauty is a few things can exist. You can say Charlie Kirk was a massive hypocrite. I disagreed with him and his entire journey. I don't really have much empathy for the situation. You can understand all that while also saying this is not a cycle that we want to start. When bullets start flying for political debates, it doesn't choose ideology. People across the aisle will begin to die, even your favorite politicians, if you continue to incite this. So you can say, oh yeah, he's a hypocrite. He made this quote, and this quote is directly contradictory. But don't mistake that quote as a justification, because then you're like these people who can't see any nuance. Fox host Jesse Waters immediately says, they're at war with us. Who's they? We don't know who did this. Patrick Casey says, it's time to bring the hammer down on the left. Again, they're saying Charlie Kirk being assassinated is the American Reichstag fire. That's the same tweet I read earlier. There's no going back after this, says Aesthetica. I'd like to think that this is not the end-all be-all. Things are obviously going to be intense, but Charlie Kirk was not a politician. We've had politicians die over the past 3 months. A Democratic lawmaker and her husband were assassinated in their homes, and that was tense. That was on the No Kings protest day. Things get tense, but we do recover. Now, Ezra Klein had a good piece in the New York Times, and I just want to really quickly read this. He said, the foundation of a free society is the ability to participate in politics without fear of violence. To lose that is to risk losing everything. Charlie Kirk and his family just lost everything, and as a country, we came a step closer to losing everything, too. What he's saying is that violence begets violence. When something like this starts, get nasty. He says, we've been edging closer to this for some time now. In 2020, a plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, was foiled by the FBI. In 2021, a mob stormed the Capitol in an effort to overturn the result of the election, and pipe bombs were found in DNC and the RNC. In 2022, a man broke into Nancy Pelosi's home while she was absent and beat her husband. And then Trump was almost assassinated. Brian Thompson was killed. Molotov cocktails were thrown into the home of Governor Josh Shapiro. He says, you can dislike much of what Kirk believed, and the following statement is still true. Kirk was practicing politics in the right way. And this is where people may disagree, but I'm just going to read what Ezra Klein wrote. He said, he was showing up to campuses and talking with anyone who would talk to him. He was one of the era's most effective practitioners of persuasion. And I agree with this sentence. He was persuasive, not to me, not that I believed his arguments, but he very clearly started a movement that grew in size among people my age. I have friends that are posting about him relentlessly, so there is very clearly something persuasive there. And my worry here is, just to back up, from a very high level, you know what my worry is? Charlie Kirk constantly uses the line, when the left can't debate, they resort to violence. And this feeds into that narrative, even though, quote unquote, the left had nothing to do with it. I understand that. We don't even know who did this. This cannot be extrapolated onto any political ideology. Even if it was some lunatic, all of the Democratic politicians have condemned that, and they're always very responsible. Just the problem is, in the broader eye, people are going to view this in a certain optical way, and I already see it popping up on social media. People thinking that the left can't debate, so they do this. That's why we need to make sure we are responsible, and we are debating in a responsible way. This says, when the left thought its hold of the hearts and minds of college students was nearly absolute, Kirk showed up again and again to break it. Slowly, then all at once, he did. College-age voters shifted sharply right in the 2024 election. He says, on social media, I've seen decent and human reactions to Kirk's murder. There is grief and shock from the left and the right, but I've seen two forms of reactions that are misguided, however comprehensible the rage or horror that provoked them. One is a move on the left to wrap Kirk's death around his views. After all, he defended the Second Amendment, even admitting it meant accepting innocent deaths. On the right is to turn Kirk's murder into a justification for an all-out war or a Reichstag fire. But as the list above reveals, There's no world in which political violence escalates but is just contained to your foes. Even if that were possible, it would still be a world of horrors. I'll link the rest of this, but I appreciate all of you. We are building a big movement, and we're going to continue to double down, hammer it home, and win back power. I appreciate you all, and peace out.